Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Prep Life Podcast. This is your founder and CEO of Glam Girl Bikini, Amy Anger. And today I am joined by a special guest, Miss Kayleigh Obert, and she is a fitness coach. She's been fitness coaching since 2018. She's a mom of two, a 7-year-old and a 6-month-old. She specializes in lifestyle and contest prep, and she focuses on empowering women in their fitness journey. She is also a national level bikini competitor and a wife. So Kayleigh, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're here. And tell us a little bit about what started your business journey. So first of all, if you would share the name of your business as well.
Yeah, I just started my own coaching business, actually, Cupcake Muscle. I started competing myself in 2014, which is a long time ago now.
Wow.
So I did that. Let's see, I started coaching in 2018 is when I first started coaching, actually under that same brand, Cupcake Muscle.
Yeah.
I wanted to help women. There was a lot of information out there. And as you know, not always great information. And so I was like, you know what? I just want to do it differently. I want to focus on health, focus on longevity in the sport. And so that's kind of how it was born.
What got you interested in competing in 2014?
I saw a local girl post a picture from her show day, and it was my husband, but then it was at the time my boyfriend. I was like, I'm gonna do this, and he's like, you can't do that, it's too hard. And that's all it took. Like, he wasn't being mean, he was just saying, like, I don't think you understand what it takes to compete. And I was like, I'm gonna show him. So I just like dived in, found a random coach, and did a show. And then once I stepped on stage, I was like, oh, I really like this.
Nice. How'd you do at your first one?
I think I got second place at my first show.
Showed him. No,
Yeah, showed him. I showed him for sure. But yeah, I mean, it was tough. And that was on a really old school, people would say old school bodybuilding style, where it was like I had a meal plan and there was no substitutions. Like, I remember my first peak week, I got tilapia only for every meal.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
And
rough.
I was
It
like, I
sounds
remember
like the plan I was on.
I almost passed out in the hallway, and I was like, but this is what you do. I'm hardcore, right? I had like no muscle. I didn't know what I was doing.
Well, you did pretty well. So where are you located right now?
I'm in Quincy, Illinois,
Okay.
which is about 2 hours from St. Louis and 4 hours from Chicago.
And what's your educational background?
I have my bachelor's degree. I actually went to school for broadcast journalism.
Oh, okay.
But entry level was low, and I already worked in the nursing field at a veterans home. So I never actually used my degree. I just took an office job there.
Okay.
I was there 10 years, I think, and then went full-time coaching in 2019.
Okay. What sparked your interest in wanting to coach? Because it was like 4 years in between, if I'm
Yeah,
right.
so people used to always ask, because when you compete on social media, people will just see, oh, she looks fit, I want her to coach me. And they would message me and be like, will you coach me? And I'm like, no, I don't know how to coach. I'm just coached. And so there was some local people. I live in a very small town, and there was somebody who like did one show and became a coach, and just trashing women. Like, I mean, super low calorie. Just, she didn't know what she was doing. I think maybe she meant well. And I was like, I want to be different than this. Like, I want to help women, but I want them to be able to compete and still be able to live healthy afterwards. So I got my NASM certifications, because I was like, what do you do? There's no like playbook for how to become a competition prep coach. Like,
There's not like a major or something.
Yeah. And I had 4 years of experience with a really good coach that knew what he was doing. So I felt like that was education in itself, to at least know like proper protocols. So then I just went and got some certifications, because I'm like, I feel like I can't just be a coach without certifications. Like, someone's going to ask, And now, years later, I realized there's much more you're more qualified by being just an experienced coach versus having like, whatever you can list off that you've went to school for.
Mhm.
especially when it comes to bodybuilding. You know, there's just no playbook for it, no
Yeah.
formal education for it.
So many
So I started
nuances. Yeah.
doing it on my own. I remember I posted one time in my story and I was like, I'm coaching now. And I had like 15 clients in like 3 days. And I was like, oh no, I can never post about
Wow.
this again. Cause that's a lot of people when you're just
That
starting.
is.
Yeah. And so I did it on my own for a year. And then my coach was Paul Ravella. And I was like, hey, what would I have to do to be a coach on the team? And he was like, if my wife says you're in kind of thing. And then I worked there for 4 years, worked for him for 4 years, and just went back out on my own.
Awesome. So I wanted to have you on today because I know that you've just recently had a baby. So congratulations. And
Thank you.
it sounds like you, if I'm doing the math right again, you started competing before you had your first child, Pearl. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So tell us about how your competition journey, like how you had a child and then you also had a postpartum journey. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a timeline with all of that and
Yeah.
how that all played
So
out?
when I was pregnant with my daughter in 2016, which would have been 2 years into competing,
Okay.
I kept all my training and stuff the same through that pregnancy. I obviously, as your belly grows, you change, how you lift a little bit, but I was just determined. Like when I got pregnant, I remember so many people saying like, your body is never going to be the same. And they were like, happy about that. And something about that was just like when my husband told me I couldn't
Yeah,
compete,
I was just gonna say.
other women telling me my body wouldn't be the same. I was like, I am going to show them. And so probably quicker than I should have, I got right back into like training and nutrition and everything. And I stepped on stage, I think it was 8 months postpartum.
Oh, wow.
With my daughter, and I looked good. I mean, I should have given it a little more time because your abdomen just doesn't quite go flat that quick postpartum.
Yeah.
Um, and then I just kept competing. I competed in, so that would have been 17, 18. I think I did 3 shows. And then 2019, I think I did like 9 or 10 shows. I was just like,
Whoa.
and I kept, yeah, and it was like, it was fun. I think almost every show in 2019, I was getting first place and I kept being in that overall. And it just like sparked me. I still haven't gotten an overall yet, but I kept being like right there, almost having it.
Yeah.
And then I did at this end stint of all of that, I did a national show, which I got last call outs, which was like, okay, Kayleigh, you need to take some off season. Like by the time I got to the national stage, I had lost so much muscle. I just dieted for too long that year,
Yeah.
which was a good lesson for me. And then I really got in the thick of coaching. I had a lot of clients. I had over 100 clients for a pretty long period of time in 2020 and 21. And so I just focused. I got into a prep right before I got pregnant with my son. So I was in prep again in, what would that be, beginning of 22. I think.
Okay.
And about a month out, I had to have hand surgery. And through all of this as well, I've had 6 breast surgeries. And so like a month out from my show in 2022, I needed hand surgery. Like I couldn't cross my fingers. I was losing like any mobility in my hand, and I needed another breast surgery. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to call it. Like it was hard after prepping for that long, but it was the right thing to do. And they happened to catch, I had a thyroid disorder. I have Hashimoto's and hypothyroid. So they caught all of that in that mix, which then I was able to get pregnant because I didn't know I had a thyroid issue. We had been trying for 2 years, and yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. So as far as your postpartum journey, you said that you basically stepped on stage after 8 months postpartum. So can you kind of walk us through, like, did you breastfeed? What did that look like?
I did. I breastfed. So right after I had her, I went right into a reverse diet.
Okay.
Because I tracked macros probably till I was about 6 months pregnant. And then I was like, it kind of got to where it's like, I'm going to gain weight. It was really hard the first time to watch my body change. I didn't handle it well. And my body just puts on weight. Even though I was 130 pounds when I got pregnant with her. And I ended at 175 pounds. And I was like training every day, 5 times a week, doing all the things. So I started a reverse diet just to make sure I was optimizing everything postpartum. I breastfed for 4.5 months. I didn't really, I don't think I did any cardio or anything during that time. And then when the breastfeeding stopped, I started a diet phase. So I dieted about 3.5, 4 months for that show.
Okay.
And then I did another one a month after that.
How was that with your breastfeeding and keeping your calorie counts like where they needed to be with your
So
activity
I
level and all of
found
that?
that the biggest thing for me personally, and I find this with a lot of my clients, it's more about food selection and less about calories as a whole.
Okay.
So with my daughter, I didn't have any issues with milk supply. I did the second time. And so I would add in things like oatmeal, foods that are supposed to be known to help with milk production. Again, the second time was a little harder because I have my thyroid disorder, which it just threw everything. I didn't breastfeed as long with my son this time. But yeah, so I breastfed with her 4.5, and honestly, I wish I would have done it longer. And I think I could have went through almost all my prep breastfeeding. But I had this mindset where like I needed to get my body back, and I thought I needed to start supplements, because at that time I was still thinking that like supplements were going to make or break my physique and my prep, which now I know that's not true.
Not true.
But at the time I thought it was, I really needed that pre-workout and, all these things I didn't even need to take and waste money on. But my, things went, it's crazy to think now, but at that time I worked outside of the home at a nursing home. I just set up a really good schedule. Like my husband's very supportive of me, competing. So what I would do is I would, the night before, get all of my food prepped, ready to go. I would lay out my clothes for the gym, my daughter's clothes for daycare, and then have like my work clothes ready. I would set an alarm, get up, go to the gym, and either do my lifting or do some of my cardio, come back, get myself ready for work, get my daughter ready for daycare. And then I would take her to daycare, take myself to work. I had an hour lunch break. So on that hour, I would either lift or finish any cardio that I had left, get her from daycare after work. If at that point, depending on, because depending on what part of your prep you're in, depends on, how much cardio you have. Sometimes I would have to take her to the gym with me to finish whatever I didn't have complete, which she loved. They had a daycare there and she would just play. Or, they would hold her, I guess. I'm thinking of when she was older, but, and then I would go home and just do it all over again. And I just it put me in this routine. How I didn't burn myself out and how I even made it through. I like thinking about doing that a second time now. I'm just like, how did I do that? but I did, and I really enjoyed doing it.
It's amazing how you can find the time. You realize like when you're busy, how much time you actually have that if you really are intentional about it. And I think it's so key to get things done before little heads are awake, and like on breaks when you can do it. I mean, I did the same thing as well when I was working, teaching. So I totally get it. So as far as your, you mentioned supplements. So you didn't take any kind of like fish oils or even probiotic or multivitamin while you were breastfeeding?
No, I only took my prenatal.
Okay.
This time around, I've taken, again, I just took a prenatal, like a hair, skin, and nails for postpartum and creatine.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, even in general, I don't use a lot of supplements. I used to use a ton, and anymore, I try to really get what I can from food.
Yeah, definitely. So do you have, now that you've had your son, what was your kind of regimen after you had him, like with working out and food and everything?
Different. And I don't know for better or for worse different, but with my son, I put on more weight. So I ended this pregnancy at 190 pounds.
Okay.
Granted, I have much more muscle than I did. Everyone says I looked smaller this pregnancy, but I felt a lot bigger. But I have a lot, like I put on a ton of water retention at the end of my pregnancy. So this time, right after I had him, because I actually tracked macros almost to the end of having my son, which with my daughter, I had, stopped. And started dieting right after, like, being in a calorie deficit right after I had my son. And I'm down now. Let's see, he's 6 months old today, and I'm at like 145. So I feel like I have another
45 pounds.
like 10 pounds before I'm kind of at my pre-pregnancy weight.
Okay.
I'm not doing any cardio right now. I'm back into training like regular now. I had a really hard time this time, like having the time. Like I know I have the same amount of time, but I don't know if it's age because I'm 38. So I'm older. It's a second kid. I mean, work-wise, I'm not busier because I work from home and I can kind of choose, how big my client load is and things like that. But I had a little bit more postpartum depression this time around, and I think it's just maybe age, could be my thyroid. I struggled really bad with milk supply this time. I only breastfed till he was 3 months old, and I tried every food. I tried lots of calories. I tried supplements because with thyroid I couldn't have fenugreek, which is like one of the main things for milk production. So it was a whole thing, and finally I got so exhausted with just trying and then feeling like I was failing because I couldn't produce enough. So yeah, it's a little different this time. I didn't train quite as soon. Like I think when I had my daughter, I was training like a week after. Like my doctor had cleared me. I didn't have any complications with delivery, but I was just so like, I don't know, I was ready to go and ready to prove everybody wrong. And this time I think it's because I know I can go right back to where I was. So I don't have this urgency and this thing to prove because I know I can get there, where the first time you don't know, like you don't actually know if you can get it back and what's going to happen. So I think that's probably some of why I just didn't like take it quite so hard postpartum this time in terms of trying to get my body right back.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you kind of track macros throughout the entire pregnancy. So I think a lot of times people have a bit of a misunderstanding about like how many more calories you're supposed to have when you are pregnant. And then,
you don't have to eat for two. By the end of pregnancy, I was having 500 more calories than my pre-pregnancy, which is not a ton. And I might get these wrong right now, but I think first trimester, you don't even really have to up them. And then second trimester, like 200 to 300. And then, but it really is all of that on paper. But it depends on if you were in a reverse when you started and you got pregnant, you may never have to even up your calorie amount. You know what I mean? If you're under eating, then obviously you would. So a lot of that is per person. But my main concern was I get very busy, and it's not that I forget to eat because I love food, but I just get busy and keep telling myself I'll stop and eat, and then I don't. So I wanted to make sure I was getting in enough protein for the development of my son, make sure I had enough energy, make sure I wasn't under eating fats either. So for me, and I just like the control of it. Like some people are like, I don't want to count macros forever, where I'm one of those people where I just genuinely enjoy it. I like knowing, I guess, that I'm checking off the boxes and that I'm having enough nutrition in a day.
Yeah. So with that, kind of like, were you being guided by a coach at that point when you were pregnant and
No, I did that on my own. Yeah, I haven't. I always do my own nutrition and training. Paul has done all of my preps since 2015. So after my first two shows, I hired him in 2015. And he's been my prep coach every time, but just my general nutrition, I just take it over myself. And my training, I've done my own training for quite a long time.
So with your first pregnancy, postpartum, you said that you got back to the gym after a week. So in terms of like abdomen, and like,
so one, I don't know. The only thing I really paid attention to is like diastasis recti, like pelvic floor, didn't know her. Like, I don't know what I was doing. I mean, I did only do like treadmill and upper body, but I know I'm pretty sure I got back into lower body at like 3 weeks postpartum, which I mean, everything was fine. Yes, I could have hurt myself. Yes, it wasn't the smartest thing in the world, but I did it this time around. I knew a lot more. So I obviously guided myself in a much safer realm. But when you don't know, you don't know. And then once you do, you're like, oh, I could have hurt myself. but I didn't. So
did you wait like 6 weeks ish or?
yeah, this time I waited 6 weeks, and I only got into like a couple days. And I actually, because I had this time with this pregnancy, I I had a lot. I had bladder, rectal, and uterine prolapse. So
Oh, wow.
I went to a pelvic floor specialist for a couple months.
Okay.
I started probably at like a week postpartum. I started doing pelvic floor strengthening stuff, but that's not working out. That's like breath work and this time now my pelvic floor is much stronger than it's ever been after 2 kids, but I actually know about those things now. And a lot of it is I have had to research it for clients too. Even before I had my son, sometimes you just don't know anything until you have a client in a situation, and then you're like, okay, let me research this for you, and then we'll get a plan or whatever it is. So yeah.
So tell us about that. If somebody was, postpartum and they need to address that, what is the best step in trying to get
I would
pelvic
say
floor?
absolutely at your 6, and I think it would be 8 weeks if you had a cesarean, have your doctor check you right there. Because my first pregnancy, I didn't even think to ask. And so at that check, when she's like, you're cleared for everything, I was like, can you check to see if I have any prolapse, which I already had thought I did, because if you have a uterine prolapse postpartum, it'll feel like you can just feel that there's pressure. I knew something down there wasn't right. And so I was like, can you check? And then they'll tell you what degree it is. And then they will, refer you to like a pelvic floor specialist for PT. And then diastasis recti, you can just Google like how to check diastasis recti, or put it into YouTube and find a million videos on how to check if you have it. Because even if you don't have any pelvic floor issues, you definitely, I think a lot of women think like they'll just start doing crunches and doing core work, not realizing like the odds that somebody would have no diastasis recti after pregnancy is really slim. You're probably going to have some degree of it. And I had a little bit, I think I had like a 2-finger width this time. And so now it's completely closed. So I always, like, the first thing I do for any of my postpartum clients, because a lot of people are like, I want to get right back into it. I'm like, okay, well, instead, let's do 6 weeks of pelvic floor work, wait till you're cleared, and then we can get into doing other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So with sleep and new moms, like, do you have any advice as far as, what was that kind of like with having, new babies and things like that?
Man, so with my daughter, I got 9 weeks maternity leave. So that was
nice.
At the time, I thought not enough, but that was great. I literally, if she was sleeping, I would sleep, or I would just sleep when I wanted. This time around, when you work for yourself, at that time, I still worked for Pro Physique, but there's no maternity leave. I was working, I had my son at 8 p.m. and by 8 a.m., I'm laying in my hospital bed with my son answering client check-ins. Because you can't have a client pay and be like, hey, I'm going to take a couple months off. You're going to keep paying me.
Exactly.
It just doesn't work that way. And there was nothing that we could come to an understanding company-wise for me to get any time off. So I was like, I'll just do it. I'll figure it out. And so I did. But I think that led to the postpartum depression being worse, and just it caused it, I got really, really run down. I still answered all the check-ins same day, and I still made everything happen. But I was like, I would wake up, sometimes my son would wake up to eat, and I would just sit in bed and cry and be like, please let me, like, I just need a little bit. Like, I really think like it was wild for about probably a month. I just wasn't, he was up every 2 hours, and then I was working. So what I would do is I would wake up, do like 2 hours of work. If he was sleeping, I would just go lay in bed with him and sleep, get up. That way I was getting all my work done, but just trying, like, it was just broken sleep. It was until he was 3 months old that I got a full night's sleep. Because at that point I told my husband, I'm like, you've got the baby tonight. He's on formula now. And when I was, I think it was 4 or 6 weeks postpartum, when I was still breastfeeding, I just wasn't producing a lot, but I, for like 3 days, would just save just a little bit of milk and stored it. And told my husband, I'm like, I don't feel great. I need a full night's rest. So I got enough milk where he could bottle feed him through the night. That day he falls off an 8-foot roof and breaks his foot.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so then I had to bathe my husband, bring him all of his food meals, everything. And I was
Oh
like,
wow.
no, he's gonna get a full night's sleep. Like postpartum just threw
Oh
everything at me this time. So that's why I was like, you
man.
know, I could get my body back in 8 months this time, but I think I'm just gonna take it easy. And the funny thing is, I mean, I'm 6 months in and I'm only 10 pounds off. So I'll probably be, because back in 2016, stage lean was much different than now. So I'll probably be right
Yeah.
back to where I was with my daughter without rushing myself into it.
Yeah, that's crazy. So what does he do? Is he a roofer?
No, I wanted a really big outdoor greenhouse. And so he built that for me for Mother's Day. My son was born, let's see, April 16th. So for Mother's Day, I wanted this big enclosed greenhouse. So he was finishing the roof part, stapling netting or like screen on top,
Hmm.
and he fell through.
Oh, geez. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, when you mentioned that part about the um maternity leave when you're an online coach, I had two of my coaches that I mentor, they were pregnant last year, and it was like I mean, I can like kind of cover their check-ins, but it's kind of a weird job in the fact that there's
Yeah.
not like really a way that you can actually work out
There's,
paternity leave that you actually are really off,
yeah.
unfortunately. But yeah, that's interesting that you kind of ran into the same thing. So do you have any advice for moms in terms of just like raising kids and kind of making the whole prep life work and things like that?
I think, you know, if you're in it when they're born, like my kids are born into it. So
Uh-huh.
I feel like that's an easier scenario. Like if you're already into fitness or you're already into prep life and you have kids, they just grow up knowing no different. Like my daughter, if I say I'm working out in the garage, she is on the leg press. Like she said, and she is just like, mom. And sometimes even I'm like, I don't feel like working out. She's like, come on, let's go out to the gym and work out. She'll steal my rice cake. She loves broccoli. I mean, she likes cookies too, but they
That's
don't,
adorable.
it's just part of their life. Like she's watched me literally her whole life weigh my food. She's never asked me about it. She never tries to weigh her own food. She never even has asked me why I do. It's just like, that's what mom does. Like, it's probably what she thinks. Or she probably goes to her friend's house and be like, hey, mom, her mom doesn't weigh her food. But if it's not, slow integrations into things, because you can't, if you already have a 7-year-old and all of a sudden you want to get healthier and have, prep, you switch their regular ketchup for reduced sugar ketchup, and I don't know what's going to happen. But my daughter tastes regular ketchup now. She's like, mom, this kind of tastes weird. I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, she's just grown up with the other healthier alternatives. But advice is just, it helps a lot if you have support. Which I do feel like I'm married, but my husband travels for work. So he's gone most of the time Monday through Friday or Monday
Okay.
through Thursday.
Uh-huh.
And you just have to be really good at pockets of time. I mean, the odds that I can get all of my cardio, I'm not doing cardio, but that I could do a bunch of cardio and train at the same time, probably not going to happen. But I can split it up into chunks, do my training at one point, do my cardio at another point. We all eat like, because I don't cook really. Like I cook, but I like meal prep cook.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
There's a difference. It's like microwave
yeah,
the
so
vegetables or
yeah. So usually what we do is like, my daughter just loves like plain chicken or plain beef or whatever because she's grown up. So like I'll make her mac and cheese because that's probably her favorite food, and then I'll just pair it with like some broccoli and some chicken, and she's super excited about it. So I guess she probably eats really plain, which sounds sad out loud, but she does eat a lot of chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. So I guess she's doing okay.
yeah, normal 7-year-old.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a leg press. Do you have a gym in your house, and does that help you quite a bit?
Yeah, it does. We built a full gym when I was pregnant with my daughter. I trained in a public gym probably maybe 7 months. And the amount of, and it was always a man that would come up and ask me if it was safe or if I should be doing that. And I just got so sick of it that I told my husband, I'm like, I have to have a home gym because I'm just going to end up snapping on somebody. And so we just slowly acquired equipment. So we'll just wait till like a gym will be going out of business and have a bunch of, or like Facebook Marketplace or COVID. We got a lot of equipment during that time because a bunch of people bought it and they didn't want it. And so then they would sell it cheap, everybody who like made home gyms and then didn't use them. But we just slowly add to it. I've been going back to a gym now because I feel like when there's people around, I do push harder. Like, I don't know. It's like I'm proving to invisible people, who aren't even looking at me at the gym that I can lift. So I've been back in a regular gym now, but we do have a full gym if I need it.
It's nice. So is there any questions or any things that you want to share with the audience before we hop off? Maybe questions that I didn't ask you that you thought would be helpful?
I can't think of any. Just anybody who's postpartum, like, give yourself some grace. Don't be like Kayleigh, her first child. Like, it's not a timeline and it's not a competition. I know for me, especially when I am pregnant, just because my body just puts on weight, it's hard. You'll always see somebody on social media who only gained like 10 or 15 pounds, who like still looks all but belly like a competitor, or like they lift. And it can be really hard sometimes. It's easy to look at them and think, you did something wrong or you should have done it differently. And then afterwards, our bellies and our bodies are just not what we remember. But it really does go back. It just takes time, just, one day at a time. And then a year postpartum, we'd be like, okay, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah. Do you feel like when you competed before you're pregnant and then after, was there any sort of difference, anything that changed other than obviously your routine definitely changed when you were prepping?
I looked way better. I look way better now. The times I've stepped on stage postpartum after my daughter, I look way better. I don't know if that's like just, muscle maturity. I would assume my hips probably got a little bigger, just from having kids, but I look way better on stage now, than I ever did before. But the criteria has changed a little too, more muscle, leaner. So even though I think that and when I got into competing, like I was definitely one of those like cardio CrossFit girls. They're just like, oh, I can do bodybuilding. Like, I didn't even know, like I would dumbbell press like 10 pounds, like, oh, it's so hard.
I think it was a different sport though in 2014. The look was way different.
Yeah, it 100%. Was a maintainable beach body back then. Now it's not for top level. It is not a maintainable beach body. But yeah, I think I just looked better. But I lifted through my entire pregnancies, and you just slowly gain muscle over time.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for your time being on today. I really appreciate you sharing all of those nuggets. And is there a way that people could reach out or say thank you for being on the podcast? What are some ways that we can find you?
I always answer all my Instagram DMs. So Cupcake Muscle, if you ever have a question or need anything, I do eventually answer all my DMs.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it. This is your founder and CEO of Glam Girl Bikini, Amy Enger, signing off. Thanks for listening, guys.